who's a member of a group that we know for a fact was targeted by the brick. She's from Veterans for Peace. Joan Livingston's been an activist in our community for years. She is out there every Saturday protesting against drones. She's out there for every event to help to support Bradley Manning. She was part of Occupy. Joan is a fixture of the Boston activism scene. Yeah, and so I'd like to welcome Joan up here to give us a short chat about how the bricks affected her life.
I have a historical quiz question for people in regard to what's going on in the country generally today, including surveillance. Can anyone identify who said and when, "Mine will be the most transparent administration in history, and you will see a return to the rule of law"? Someone else? After many years of Bush, we heard a lot of promises. Have there been a lot of changes in policies as far as anyone here can?
Not for the good.
I mean, I could do a 500-page printout of the 2007, 2008 statements, but most transparent in history and valuing whistleblowers, that's kind of key to the NSA thing, particularly when you have an executive branch that is claiming the right to do virtually everything in secret, which Bush himself had been criticized for doing, but we have more surveillance. A lot of people may not know it, but as a senator, Barack Obama voted for telecom immunity for Bush's wiretapping, so it shouldn't be that surprising that he's continuing to do surveillance of a little bit more even than phones, unfortunately, your Facebook messages and that kind of thing. He has secret wars going on. J. Edgar Holder, excuse me, Mr. Holder writes secret memos about who's being spied on, who's being killed, the kill list, which they work on every Tuesday, a range of other things, and we continue to get word about how much oversight there is by Congress and about these courts. The courts, it's already been mentioned, are totally rubber stamp. They were designed to be. In terms of the congressional oversight, not only do we have a fairly complacent, silence of the lambs Congress and electorate, I might add, but there has been virtually no oversight allowed by Congress, including the people on what's called the Intelligence Committee. Those of you who keep in touch with writings by Glenn Greenwald, he had an article out just today about more members of Congress who have been filing FOIA requests about what the NSA spying entails, and it is way beyond metadata. They are storing, they are recording, they are keeping all this information, and you know, that much vaunted oversight, there is no oversight. There is no advice and consent. It is all secret. It is all the Attorney General, just as he is writing these little secret memos that he will, you know, the drone killings. So it kind of, the buck keeps stopping at the White House and at the so-called Department of Justice. And just as I think there was a very great quote by Edward Snowden when he went into exile, because we remember the Declaration of Independence, and for whatever their flaws, the founders wrote some pretty good things there in the Bill of Rights. And in the Declaration, they also said that governments derive their power from the consent of the governed. We would technically be the governed. Edward Snowden said consent cannot be considered consent unless it is informed. We have not been informed on how these decisions are made, on how and who gets spied upon, on which countries we are at, excuse me, I don't want to say we, because we aren't, our government is at war with, how the decision is made to kill, assassinate children, civilians, and U.S. citizens, and in many cases, the Congress has not given consent. So I think it's a very powerful concept the founders laid out, that consent was something necessary in what we call a democracy. To go back to an Occupy kind of statement, we used to say, show me what democracy looks like. It's a little bit more like, show us what hypocrisy looks like.
That's what hypocrisy looks like.
Anyway, it is true that Veterans for Peace, we found, because with the help of the ACLU and the NLG, it was actually fairly old documents, some dating back to 2008, and then some Occupy. Veterans for Peace, and I'm a member of a whole bunch of equally evil groups, had been formally classified by the wonderful protect and serving the shit out of you public servants over here as a quote-unquote extremist group. I don't know if we had a raise since then, because I have many links with me and I'm sending them out, bothering people all the time. The federal government, the Homeland Insecurity people, have defined anti-war groups the same as environmentalists as, and I am not kidding, quote unquote, domestic terrorists. So that helps justify these budgets. When they've got no tourists to look at, they say, well, let's go look at you. So from being an extremist, representing an extremist group, and many domestic terrorist groups, and obviously anyone who was with Occupy is also, was very much watched. Those little cameras with the facial recognition, which sometimes people found out when they went to the police department that they weren't really happy to see them, and a lot of people got arrested on the basis of those photographs. What I see in terms of what the founders set out as guiding principles, both in the Declaration and in the Bill of Rights, has been turned upside down with this government, possibly for a long time. Obviously, Bush seemed very extreme at the time. Some people now say what we've got is Bush on steroids, because you can't even see what's happening, and we know there are a lot more wars, there are a lot more things, but it's not being made public. So how can you give your consent to something you don't know about? And what's really upside down, especially for someone who promised the most transparent administration in history, how come we don't know anything they're doing? They know everything we're doing. They know we're here now. They know who has talked to whom. They read the emails. They saw the Facebook post. They know every time you tweet, you might as well just send it straight to @gov. They're looking in on your Skype phone calls. So like moan them when you do Skype. That they know everything about us. It's one of the things in the Fourth Amendment, but really it goes through all of the Bill of Rights. An American citizen should have the right to do, and short of, major acts of violence and mayhem, blowing this place up, to be able, freedom of association, freedom of speech. We've seen freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. We've seen these rights stripped away, the freedom of privacy during the Boston bombing incident, which has been mentioned. The Fourth Amendment rights, the right to be secure, those are violated for everyone who lives in this area. The shelter-in-place order, people were not allowed, they were not free to go. And that's the first question when you don't know if you're being arrested. Am I free to go? People were not free to leave their homes. People in Watertown, I actually lived 2 blocks from the bombing site, and they were checking people's papers at the crosswalks. Am I free to go down my own street? No, you're not. And people in Watertown with no warrant, with no notice, they had to face, these SWAT teams saying, come in, we need to see if you've got, the guy's bleeding out in a boat down the street, and they don't know that. So they're going, so that was a complete violation of everyone's Fourth Amendment rights in so many communities across Massachusetts. So I see this as very upside down. We should know what the government's doing. It's like supposed to be in our name because it's with our taxes. But they know what we're doing, and we don't know what they're doing. It's in a memo somewhere in Holder's filing cabinet. So what do we do about that?